Hmm. Hmm. You are unmuted. Let's do a mic check. Could someone online please just confirm that you can hear us? Oh, wait.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can someone online just confirm that you can hear us?
Jackson, can you hear me? This is Kevin McKinley.
Yes, we can.
Yep,
Yep,
thank
we can
you.
hear you. Okay, let's call this meeting to order. So this is Jackson Fox with Fast Planning. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the Fast Planning Technical Committee meeting. It is Wednesday, May 3rd and 12:01 p.m. For committee members that I see present in today's meeting, we have with us today Nick Sarnecki, Brett Nelson sitting in for Judy Chapman, Kate Duber, Kevin McKinley, Bob Christash, Bill Rogers, John Natardis, Kellen Spillman, RJ Stump, Jacob Toyrick, and I believe Danny Wallace. I believe that's the 488 number on the screen. If that's you, Danny, can you say hello? Or perhaps that's John Weinberger. All right, we'll wait to hear his confirmation, but committee members that I see absent today is Justin Burgess, Lieutenant Mike Roberts, Danny Wallace, and John Weinberger. For Fast Planning staff, we have with us today myself, Jackson Fox, Corey DiRotigliano, Olivia Lunsford, and Deborah Todd. And then other guests in the meetings, I see we have Morgan McCann, Don Galligan, Randy Bailey, Adam Morrill, Teresa Dutchuk, and Bryant Wright. Is there anyone in the meeting as a guest that I didn't announce? If so, go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know that you're here.
Hi, this is Danny Wallace. Hi, this is
Oh, hey,
Danny
Danny.
Wallace. I'm in the meeting.
Wonderful. Thanks, Danny. We got you down. Okay, that's what we have with us today. Let's move on to approval of the May 3rd, 2023 meeting agenda. Do I have a motion on the agenda? Anyone? Anyone want? All right, Jacob, move to approve. Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you, Kevin. Any changes to today's agenda? Hearing none. Anyone opposed to approval of the agenda as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider it approved. That takes us to approval of the April 5th, 2023 meeting minutes, which are on pages 2 through 8 of the packet. Can I get a motion on the minutes?
move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Kevin. Is there a second?
Second, this is Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Any edits to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. Anyone opposed to approval of the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider those approved. All right, moving on to committee and working group reports. We have two updates for you today, which begins on page 9. First, I'm going to go over the action items from the policy board meeting, which was held on April 19th. And then I'm going to turn it over to Olivia to talk about our annual bike and ped count program. So starting with the policy board meeting that was held last month, a few items of note for the technical committee. First one of which is the policy board did approve my proposed funding strategy for the congestion mitigation and air quality and carbon reduction program funds. So that strategy has been approved by the policy board without any revision or amendments to that. And that is what I'm using to develop our official funding plan, which I'll bring back to the technical committee and policy board in June. I am still waiting on some SSEs or scope schedules and estimate from DOT for various projects, so that I have all of the numbers that I need to populate that funding plan. And I will give a more lengthy update on that here underneath agenda item 7A a little bit later in the meeting. The policy board also approved our requested budget amendment for the fast planning office. And the policy board did direct us to develop a revision to our fiscal policy that covers both budget transfers and budget amendments. So I do have some proposed language to bring forward to the technical committee at this meeting underneath item 8C, moving forward to help streamline our budget amendment process. And then lastly, between the last month's technical committee meeting and our policy board meeting, DOT did receive the bids back for the Fifth Avenue reconstruction project. The low bid, including construction engineering and ICAP, came in about $900,000 over what was programmed in our TIP document. And so I presented a series of options to the policy board on providing that additional funding so that DOT could award that contract. And we'll discuss this a little bit later underneath item 8B, but the policy board decided to use 2024 advanced construction funds to pay for that increase and to take that funding from the Mini Street upgrade project, which in effect delays the Mini Street upgrade project by 1 year across all phases. And I'll show you that in the funding plan a little bit later on here in the meeting. Any questions on those policy board action items before I turn it over to Olivia to talk about our annual bike and pet count program? Yeah, Kellen, go ahead.
Question. It appears there were several different kind of amendments that were floated out there for how to fund Fifth Avenue.
Yes,
But ultimately, if I'm reading these correctly, they funded what we recommended, that option, and then that's essentially just going to delay Main Street, but Fifth Avenue can proceed.
well, the technical committee didn't recommend the option here because this request came in between the technical committee and policy board meeting, and there was need to get the funds approved in short order so that that construction contract could get awarded. Olivia, if you go to page 10, you'll see the three different options that I presented to the policy board. Option A was the option that they ended up going with. Again, that's delaying all phases of Mini Street out 1 year to accommodate that increase using 2024 advanced construction dollars. Option B was to ask the city to cover that increase using their capital budget. That was not a popular option with the board. And then option C was to take a group of projects that we plan to initiate project starts this year and push those out a year. So you can see the Lacey Street Planning Study, the Airport Way, Pega Road Intersection Study, and Pioneer Park North Parking Lot and Boat Launch, the design start. So the amendments were related to a combination of options A and C. The amendment that was made ended up failing. And then the policy board ended up deciding unanimously to go with option A after that initial amendment failed.
Follow up if I may. Am I reading this right? Those estimates came in 40% over engineer's estimate?
It was about 29% was the calculation on the phase 4 construction phase.
That's kind of unheard of, right?
Not for what DOT is seeing for bids this year. I don't remember the exact number quoted, but the bridge over Aurora Drive, I think was 50% over. It was something very large. So no, DOT is experiencing a similar pattern with the bids this spring.
They even go to a rabbit hole. Is this is kind of nationwide?
I don't know that.
Okay.
I only know what we're seeing here locally. John, go ahead.
It's about 24% over on average.
Well, there you go. That's helpful for DOT Northern Region projects, I assume. Or is that a for statewide? That's statewide. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, let's turn it over to Olivia for the annual bike and ped count program, which begins on page 11 underneath the staff report section.
So as you all might be aware, we do host an annual bike and ped count. I think this is gonna be our 12th year, we decided this.
Yes, 12th year.
12th year running. So this is just a map. I've got a different one to show you in a second. Just to kind of highlight the range of intersections that we try to get data for this time each year. And this is the data over the past 11 counts. So you can see that there are some gaps in the data. And so we decided to approach the volunteer sign up a little bit differently this year to try to get all of those intersections filled over multiple days. So we've got it posted on a page on our website, and folks can either click this volunteer now button or just scroll down to check out the locations, and they can find the name of the intersection that they want. And they can keep scrolling down. That volunteer now button will also just kick them down to the spot if they already know where they want to count. And then we are using a host feature called Zephy, and it's super great. It allowed me to basically put every intersection in for these individual days to keep it really organized. So someone can go in and sign up for just one intersection on Tuesday, or they could do a different intersection on each day. Super user friendly. They just click it and then they can say, okay, I know what the intersection was that I wanted to sign up for. And then they just give us their name and their email. And then we'll do communications with them via email about when to come and pick up a materials packet and their swag item, which this year we're giving out high vis vests that have a Fast Paying logo on the back. And it's just a really straightforward sign up process. And again, we're hoping to get a lot more volunteers. So I sent the technical committee an email earlier this week, or maybe that was last Friday, about the bike and ped count with all of the links. I might send a follow-up email with just a link to this particular webpage because it's a lot more useful, and it would be great if everyone could just pass along this information to your peers and your coworkers and anybody that you think might be interested in volunteering. So, and for those of you on Zoom, I'll put the link in the chat if you feel like signing up right now.
Any questions or comments for Olivia?
Oh, well, I guess I should say that the count is happening on, it says it down here, but it's on Tuesday, May 23rd, Wednesday, May 24th, and Thursday, May 25th. So, and it looks like we have a question in Zoom. Hey, Kevin, what's up?
Yes, if somebody's already volunteered for that position, does that not show up or show that it is taken?
Correct. Yeah, it'll say that it's full. So you can see here, there's just one slot per intersection per day. So it's full on this day, but you could check a Wednesday or Thursday to see if it's available either of those days, if you have one that you've got your heart set on. But if not, I mean, there's definitely some flexibility here. Or you could try a new intersection every day and just mix it up, you know?
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, if there's no other questions for myself or Olivia, let's go ahead and move on to their public comment period. Is there any member of the public that wishes to provide testimony today on anything not listed as an action item on the agenda? If so, go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you can proceed with your testimony. Anybody? Okay, not seeing any public comment today, so we'll go ahead and close the public comment period and move on to our first agenda item, which is item 7A. Underneath old business, the congestion mitigation and air quality and carbon reduction program update. This begins on page 16 in your packet. So included in your packet on pages 16 through 19 is the 4-page funding strategy that I presented to the technical committee last month to advance to the policy board. I'm not going to go over this in detail because I did last month, but I do want to provide a few updates for some specific projects. And then just overall to note again, as I stated during my staff report, that at Fast Planning, we still are waiting on some SSEs or scope schedules and estimates from DOT for about a half dozen projects. We expect to receive those around mid-May. And then once those are received, I will have all of the funding numbers for each of the phases of the project, design, utilities, right of way, and construction, to put together into an official funding plan following this strategy to bring back to the technical committee and policy board for approval. So next month, you will see the official funding plan with all of the amounts for each project phase that are provided by DOT. So now just kind of diving into a few projects of note. On this first page here, the max transit subsidized ticketing. I just wanted to make the technical committee aware that next month, Jerry Clearworth does plan to make a motion at the June meeting to remove project number 2 there for the max transit subsidized ticketing, remove funding for that project. And he did make the policy board aware that he plans to make that motion. He may or may not be successful. But his comments at the policy board meeting was that he preferred that this money be spent on infrastructure as opposed to subsidizing transit ticketing. And Corey did have a follow-up meeting with Jerry Clearworth to give more of a background on this project and the benefit and need for it for our community. So some conversations are happening behind the scenes, but next month, when you see the funding plan, the technical committee may want to weigh in on that for any information that you want to provide to the policy board when they make that decision. But he is planning an amendment to remove funding for that project from this program. The one just below that, the Morris Thompson Cultural and Visitor Center. Corey is working on providing some quantities and estimates for Yvette Hall over at DOT that is preparing the SSE for this project. One thing that we learned is with one aspect of this project, which is converting the bollard lights around the parking lot to LED technology. Their maintenance crews over there have taken a look at it, and it looks like a simple ballast removal and a bulb replacement. And so at fast planning, we may just cut them a check to purchase the equipment they need and remove it from the federally funded project, because it may be less than $1,000 in bulbs that we have to buy, and their maintenance staff are willing to perform the work. So we'll know this week, I think, but that's likely going to be taken out of the project and just simply done this summer. At the very bottom there, the University Avenue Rail Crossing automated train switch. In my discussions with DOT planning and pre-construction staff, this project would be ideal to either have the funding provided to the railroad as a direct recipient of Federal Highway Administration funds, or be transferred to the Federal Transit Administration, the Federal Railroad Administration, so that this money can be provided to the railroad to self-perform that project. Those latter two federal agencies, if we make that funding transfer, it likely will trigger a match commitment. And we understand that there is a concern over the ability to cover the match if the funds are transferred to a different federal agency. So I'm continuing my conversations with Kate on this, on moving this project forward. So in any event, we're trying to sort that out before the official funding plan is developed. But this is a project that is very much supported by our policy board. So we do want to try to provide the funding if at all possible for it. And it did score very highly. All right, on the next page, the downtown parking garage improvements. Corey is also working with Yvette Hall at DOT to provide some quantities and estimates for the variety of improvements at the downtown parking garage. So that's in process. The hope is that Corey can deliver some information to Yvette Hall by the end of the week to help kind of scope that project out a little bit further. And then moving on down to the electric vehicle charging stations, we are in the middle of pulling together our grant application to the U.S. discretionary grant for charging and fueling infrastructure. So we are moving forward with the grant application to try to get that bundle of 21 electric vehicle charging stations funded with some outside federal money. We will still include this in the funding plan, likely with a design start in next year, such that we'll go after this initial opportunity now. We should know the outcome of whether or not we are awarded a grant. If we were awarded a grant, we can remove the funding, but if we're not awarded a grant, we can still continue on with a design start next federal fiscal year and hopefully get it into construction by 2025. Okay, next page. The Chena Lake Recreation Area Bike and Pedestrian Access via Plaque Road. I believe John Natardis is working on the scope, schedule, and estimate for this. What John Natardis doesn't know is that behind the scenes, Corey's been working with Parks and Rec staff to develop some concepts and dimensions of the parking area and scope for the road improvements and the trail improvements out there. And so I'm going to have Corey give you a preview of what they've been working on, but I think this will be very helpful for you, John, in finishing the SSE for this project. And Corey, I believe, is going to try to deliver this to you this week. But this information is also going to be presented to Mayor Ward's office tomorrow at a meeting. So we're going to have Corey share a screen and kind of show you off some of the concepts that have been developed.
So just for a quick bit of context here, this is the Plaque Road entrance. I'll kind of zoom to a map to show everybody what area we're talking about here. So this is the Chino Lakes Rec area. The Plaque Road entrance is located at the sort of northwestern corner of the park. This is the boat launch and day use area down here to the south. The scope for this project is to formalize parking area and access to the rec area here at the Plaque Road. There's an informal trail, but there are also bollards and rails and other things in the way right now currently, but people are sort of skirting around those to get access here. This is a major launching point on this peninsula here out to the winter trails that kind of circumnavigate the lake here. And there's also a winter trail kind of depicted in green here that goes all the way up to the north. And actually extends north of what this image is showing and crosses over by the bridge that's further to the north as part of the diversion project. So the goal here is to add amenities, improve the access so that there is some ADA facilities there. And then another request was to actually try to formally connect the day use area, which currently terminates right here at the end of this green line. And they'd like to have a 10-foot wide path that connects, which will make access and maintenance in that northwestern corner a lot simpler for their crews, rather than a really roundabout way of kind of exiting the park, traveling all the way around to Plaque Road and then getting to there. The scope of elements in this area are aligned with a lot of the other types of facilities that the parks currently has. I'll kind of zoom down in here and show those. There would be an entrance sign here as you come in at the intersection here of Plaque and Gordon. They requested a trail, the non-motorized trail that diverts off of that so that pedestrians and cyclists aren't necessarily using this path to get right in there. Once it gets to the junction here before it splits off to the parking lot, there was some discussion about utilizing what's an existing unimproved trail as a launching point for ice huts in the winter months. Again, this is a really high access area down at the end of the peninsula here for those types of activities. So that may be a future improvement. They look to increase, some of the day use area amenities at that point, but for the scope of this project, it would really just include improvement of this drive access, an improved parking area, and then potentially an area to kind of plow into and snow machine launch point down here at the right side of the image. Then up here as part of the pedestrian amenities, it would include bicycle parking, CDX or CXT dual sort of toilet vault system, and then some seating as well as wayfinding, which again is part of their design standards for what they're putting into most of their parks these days. That way, kind of orients visitors to where to go. And the last piece of this is a short path that would connect people to a floating dock that's located at this cove area, just to the north of the image there. So that gives you kind of a sense of scope. We're providing these to Parks and Rec today, and they're going to use this for their discussions with the mayor to kind of talk about the funding ask and their strategy for paying for all these different components. So our hope is this helps clarify the need. And then it is my understanding that they're also seeking some alternative funding sources to cover the total cost of this project, in addition to what fast planning will contribute. So that's pretty much where this is at right now. If anyone has any questions, happy to answer those.
Any questions on Plaque? Go ahead, Kellen.
I want to say this is great. This idea really started to gain steam when we were doing that big kind of salt to badger planning effort out there. And just from a very practical standpoint, We have this major recreation area out in the Badger Road area, 20,000 people live there, some of which live a couple hundred yards away, have to drive 7 miles to access it.
Yep.
So I think this is a huge improvement that really started to gain steam there. If you go out there, we actually went out there and walked that whole alignment. There's so many informal trails in there that are honestly being abused a little bit with motorized access.
Yep.
So I can't say enough good things about this project for this community, and by far, this is where we're seeing the growth. This is the fastest growing area in the borough. This is where majority of housing we're seeing going in is. And I think this is just, again, a big benefit for bringing I shouldn't even say bringing, but linking an already existing recreation area with where 20,000 people are living.
Yeah, another point is that this kind of added access north-south would allow them to kind of keep tabs on a lot of these informal trails and things that are developing, and hopefully channel that into a hardened trail, so it's not damaging the existing area. There was something that happened that they didn't become aware of until late, but someone came out with a chainsaw in the middle of the night and bushwhacked a bunch of trees out of this area as part of the runway approach. So having this trail access allows them to sort of better observe what's happening along the perimeter of the park and in this, like you mentioned, high use sort of northern area. So, yeah. Glad you did.
Yes, John?
You said you're delivering this to the park service, or sorry, the borough parks tomorrow? Is that
Yeah.
like Tricia and Rudy?
Yep.
Okay, are y'all meeting?
We've already had a couple meetings just to talk about scope, so they're fully aware of all these elements. John wants it for that presentation, and I was kind of told by Jackson to keep you in the loop on this being sent over. Make sure you get a copy.
And you include me tomorrow?
Yep. The annotation on this package too will call out some, like the length of this trail and some of the other kind of quantities. So that should help you. There'll be dimension plans as well.
And in this SSE that I'm putting together with estimates, y'all want all these amenities that were just shown?
So the end of Black Road from Nelson to the rec area would be gravel to pavement with wide shoulders.
Yeah.
You're aware of that. Then the parking area, both the asphalt and the gravel area. You'll see in those graphics there's a big gravel area for offloading snow machines, four-wheelers, things of that nature.
And the toilet, and the signs and everything?
No toilet. I don't think we can use our federal highway funds for that particular amenity. But yeah, I think the signage would be good. And then our hope is to include these formalized trail connections as well. However, it's over 3,000 feet, so it's over a half mile of trail to improve. And so I think we want that separated out as a separate cost so that we can add it or remove it from the project as needed. Because as we understand, the borough will be seeking additional grant funding for, say the vault toilets there and some other amenities. So I don't know if in your estimate, you've included those trail improvements from the parking area all the way down to the main parking
Black Road, the parking area, and that purple trail.
area. Okay, good. Okay.
None of the other spider webby looking ones.
So when Corey delivers these to you, you'll have a better idea of what they're looking at, and specifically with regard to dimensions and number of parking spots as well, I think will be helpful to you.
Okay, thank you.
So-
Nice presentation.
Yeah, Kellen.
One question, just related to CMAC in general. We do have a lot of projects that are funded in federal fiscal year 23.
Yep.
I would assume we need to get match checks going as soon as possible for those.
Mhm.
When is kind of the desired or drop dead date for those?
So Randy is working on all the match and maintenance agreements. For the CMAC projects in particular, the state covers the match. So there is no match commitment that will have to be paid. But for any projects that we intend to use carbon reduction program funds for, that will require a 9% match. And Chino Lakes is one where we have to use carbon reduction program dollars because that's the only program that specifically makes eligible recreational facilities. The CMAC program, recreational facilities are still not eligible for that program. So, so Randy Bailey will be in contact. There's also a handful of projects in our TIP that there's a list of project starts in there as well. So that she has already drafted up, and we'll begin sending those out here soon.
Okay, perfect.
All right, so yeah, back to the meeting packet here. Olivia, if you go to page 19, the last of the 4 pages there. So at the top here, we have the shuttle bus compressed natural gas conversion for UAF. It's not only installation of a fueling station, but also replacement of the shuttle bus fleet with compressed natural gas buses. And as I understand, Jacob Toyrick is working with DOT on kind of refining their estimate for that, particularly the fueling station project. And I'm also in discussions with Jacob and his department on the possibilities for match commitment. If we use CMAQ funds, the UAF wouldn't have to pay any match. If we use carbon reduction program funds, they would have to pay a 9% match. And if we have the opportunity right now to submit this project for the charging and fueling infrastructure discretionary grant, so US DOT grant. But if we're successful in getting the money for this underneath that outside grant, then UAF would have to pay a 20% match. So I have communications into UAF to see how they feel about those different types of arrangements and what their ability is to cover those different match amounts. So again, just more things we're kind of sorting out behind the scenes before we finalize our funding plan to present to you next month. And then a couple more here, the Tanal Lakes Rec area, South Cushman Extension, and some of the side streets, which is a gravel to pavement project. You'll see later in the meeting, I'm trying to move those nominations, that one and the Gaffney Road sidewalk replacement, to our list of nominations for the Fast Improvement Program. These are good projects, but they're not good projects for this program because they don't result in any measurable benefits to air quality during the winter months when we have air quality problems. These are really for dust mitigation, which only has a summertime benefit. So I think there's other programs that these are suitable for. So you'll see later in the meeting, I've moved those over to the improvement program. And then the one on the very bottom there, the North Pole lighting enhancements, which is converting the candy cane streetlights out in North Pole to LED technology. Our project manager at DOT on the North Pole Streetlight Standardization Project, Ethan Grates, he has given a small purchase order to Kinney Engineering to come up with a design for those. And once that design is complete, he will be requesting a price from the contractor that was selected for that larger project out in North Pole to simply fund these underneath the change order. So I'll have some information back from DOT on that arrangement here this month as well. And then also in this section, you'll see pages 20 through 21, my official request to DOT for these scope schedules and estimates, which I believe there's at least 3 folks from DOT pre-construction working on these estimates for us behind the scenes. And that concludes my update on the funding strategy for these air quality projects. And happy to answer any additional questions you have. This is not an action item today, it's just an update. Any questions online? No. Okay, not seeing any questions in the room either. So let's move on to item 8A underneath new business, the Alaska DOT Carbon Reduction Program Strategy. We do have a slideshow included in the packet beginning on pages 22. And as I also see on Zoom, we do have a variety of folks from Dowell to provide this presentation to the group here today. So I don't know who from Dowell would like to kick us off, but you can just prompt us to advance the slides. I think that'll work.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for having us. My name is Teresa Duchek. I'm an environmental specialist with Dowell, and I am here with Adam. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'm Adam Morrill. I'm with Dowell, I'm environmental specialist, work a lot with DOT projects.
So we are working on this carbon reduction strategy on behalf of DOT and working alongside our Dowell transportation planners. And so we'd like to provide you an introduction and overview of the work that we've done thus far. Next slide, please. So as an overview of the process that I'm certain you all are very familiar with, the carbon reduction program and strategy stems from the bipartisan infrastructure law that was signed into law November 15th of 2021. The carbon reduction program requires a strategy to be approved by FHWA within 2 years of the implementation of that law. The Alaska STIP allocated funds from the carbon reduction program September 1st of 2022. And now our outreach to MPOs, an important part of the process, is beginning in May, and it's going to continue into June. We expect to have a draft carbon reduction strategy plan in probably late July, and we're going to open that up to a public comment period and then provide updates for MPOs as well. Final carbon reduction strategy plan is expected mid-October to go to FHWA for their approval. Beyond the final strategy plan, once it's approved, we'll start identifying projects meeting funding requirements. We do see that there's some projects already out there that are expected to be using the program funds. And then every 4 years after approval, there will be an update to the carbon reduction strategy. Next slide, please. So according to the carbon reduction program, they outline a bunch of eligible projects, and I'll note that these are outlined in the program, but it's not limited to just these projects. So we've grouped them into 4 basic areas of construction, and then there's a 5th planning category that sets aside money for plan updates and baseline measurements of carbon emissions. The 4 groups that we have thus far are transportation alternatives and complete streets. That's where we're going to find projects with alternative fuels, mass transit, active transportation, including on-road and off-road trails, and HOV lanes would fit into this category as well. And I'll point out that I understand that some of these aren't Alaska specific at this point. That's what our coordination with you folks is going to be for. The second category is congestion management and technology solutions. These would be projects, again, such as HOV lanes, advanced crash warning, roundabouts, projects that are mitigating the congestion or providing relief for congestion. The third category is energy consumption reduction. This would be where LED lighting for facilities and ports would fit into, diesel engine retrofits, street light and traffic control replacement with energy efficient alternatives, basically utilizing energy efficient alternatives for facilities. The last is construction practices, so replacement of construction vehicles and equipment with zero emission alternatives. Okay, next slide, please. So the CRP outlines some requirements of the program and the strategy, and then also identifies some goals. Requirements of the CRP include supporting the reduction of transportation emissions, and then at the state's discretion, quantifying carbon emissions from the manufacture and transport of construction materials. And projects and funding allocation must be appropriate with the population density and context within the state. Some detailed goals of this program are reduce single occupant vehicle trips, facilitate the use of vehicle or modes of travel that result in lower emissions, and facilitate approaches to construction that result in lower emissions. So a little bit of overlap there. Next slide, please. So far we've been working on some baseline data gathering and identifying some data gaps that we'll be looking forward to trying to close through this process. So for our Alaska context transportation setting, we have our baseline research of the Alaska context in it. We've got 12,000 miles of, 12,000 lane miles of roads throughout the state of Alaska, with state routes or interstates covering about 1,100 of those miles. The Alaska Marine Highway system connects about 30 communities over 3,500 miles of coastline. And according to an Alaska Airports and Aviation report, the state has more than 700 FAA registered airports. I had to cite that because I didn't believe it myself. The Alaska Railroad covers about 482 miles, largely following the interstate system from Fairbanks to Seward. So that's the Alaska transportation context. Next slide, please. Oh, and I'm going to hand it over to Adam to pick up here.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. Yeah, so as we were digging into some of the data, we were looking at the emissions that the economic sectors here in Alaska emit for carbon. And as you can see, the industry sector is about 49%, transportation's at 33%, and the electric power is about 8%. Compared to what's going on in the United States, we have 36% through transportation, 31% through electric power, and then 21% through industry. So industry is driving a lot of our emissions here in the state. And one of the great opportunities we've got in Alaska is there's a lot of green energy production, and where it's only at 8% that we're emitting through that, using these green energy sources, we can keep that those emissions low percentage of what's coming from the state, and also help reduce the transportation emissions through some of those sources for the facilities and that. And then the larger graphic there shows that a lot of the emissions through the transportation sector comes through aviation, and is followed by on-road at 27%. So it's not surprising, as we saw the figure Teresa showed previously, about 82% of Alaska's communities, they're not accessible on road. They're remote rural locations. So the carbon reduction strategy is looking to target how it can help us here in Alaska to utilize these funds to reduce our carbon emissions. And one of the things to know is the carbon reduction program funds, they're just set aside for on-road emissions for the reduction of those emissions. Next slide. So the carbon reduction program we anticipate Alaska will receive about $82 million through this over the course of 5 years. And the allocation is set up based on the metropolitan planning organizations. We anticipate receiving $29 million for them. For small urban and rural communities, about $24 million. And then the remaining 28.6 million would be able to be used statewide. These numbers, they're subject to change. One of the things that we know that's in the works is the Matanuska-Susitna Borough is looking to be designated as MPO. That's in the works right now. And so depending on when that happens, it'll either happen in this strategy report that gets prepared, or it'll happen in one of the following updates that comes along. But essentially 65% of the 82 million would go to be apportioned based on population density, and the remaining 35% could be used anywhere statewide. Next slide. And as Teresa said, the STIP has already designated some of the funds for fiscal year 2022, 2023, and beyond. And this shows kind of a breakdown of how those funds are set aside. Next slide. So this is kind of the schedule that we're running with on providing this plan and for FHWA. So as Teresa said, May, we're targeting the MPOs so that we can get some strategies that are specific to your area and have that included in the plan. So we're looking to do that. First round is here, May 3rd, May 17th, or May 9th, or May 17th with, oh, sorry, I'm reading these wrong. So May 3rd, we're here with you. AMATS, that's been bumped to June, and then the Mat-Su Borough is May 9th. And then we'll have a follow-up meeting, talk more about strategies with you guys here May 17th. June for AMATS, and the end of May with the Matsu Borough. So we're planning on having a draft plan put together that we can send over to you for review the end of July. And then, as Teresa mentioned, in August, we're planning on having some public meetings and provide an update. We anticipate our role in this will be ending September 27th, where we'll hand it off to DOT and they'll finalize and coordinate with FHWA to get everything implemented by November 15th. Next slide, and I'll pass it back to Teresa.
Thanks, Adam. So last slide here before we get into questions is these are the stated current federal administration goals. They've outlined that they'd like to see safety incorporated into the strategy, complete streets, flexibility between funding sources, ADA facilities, equity, climate resilience, jobs, and then additional truck parking is a nationwide goal of this strategy. So last slide. So what we're really looking forward to is working with the MPOs, including FAST, and identifying strategies that are specific to Fairbanks or Alaska in general. For example, I was looking through the projects in the previous session and noted wayfinding was something I had not thought of before. So ideas like that are things that we're really looking forward to coordinating with the MPOs regarding. And so we've listed some questions for everyone to think about. And so I'll open it up if anyone has any questions or has ideas for strategies thus far.
Hey, this is Danny Wallace from the city of North Pole. And I was in another meeting and so I didn't hear every single thing, but I guess this is for Jackson. How does this mesh with your efforts, Jackson, for, again, the overall funding requirements and strategy? How does this relate to it, or are projects already identified for this program?
So for fast planning, as you may have seen in the presentation there, we get a allocation of this funding based on our population makeup in comparison to the state. So we get a direct allocation of it, and we've already held a competitive process to accept project nominations, determine eligibilities, and do emission benefit calculations, in which we will officially award projects here next month. Our hope is that this carbon reduction strategy was prepared by the state prior to us initiating our process, because my hope is that we can sync up our process to fall in line with the state's goals and strategies that they include in this plan, which is something that we'll do on our next round. But in another aspect here, I think that we're a little bit ahead of the game and having thought about this quite a bit. And we had a lot of innovative projects that were nominated to us that showed emission benefits from those projects. So I think fast planning, we can provide some really good ideas on strategies that can be included in this plan, considering our cold climate and what our local governments are interested in. So it's kind of we got ahead of this, but again, next go around when you do calls for project nominations, our hope is that the new projects that are nominated to us are consistent and fall in line with the strategies outlined in this plan. And if your project is, supports this plan, then of course you'll get more points in your application when you submit that to us. Sorry, that was a long answer.
Oh, sounds good. Thank you.
Hey, Kellen, go ahead.
Question. I'm not sure if this is better directed towards Adam or maybe a DOT rep. I was looking at your funding breakdown. So 29 million for MPOs, 28 million for statewide. So my question is, that statewide money, would it be possible for an MPO to apply for that and essentially, maybe a bad term, essentially double dip like we can with transportation alternative program funds? Or is that specific for areas outside of MPOs?
You want to handle that one, Judy?
I think it's possible because it's flexible right now, so it would just be a matter of how the DOT kind of wanted to target spending those funds. I don't know that we made a hard decision on that, so I can bring that up as something we should, you know, make a decision on and let the FPOs know, because yeah, it's certainly legal for FPOs to apply for flexible funding. It's just a question of whether we want to operate the program.
You have another one, Cal?
Just my comment would be, I would advocate for that opportunity. I think it'd be good for our community. I see Kevin has a question. I can save my other questions for after.
Okay, go ahead, Kevin. You're still on mute, Kevin, if you're speaking.
My
There you go.
apologies. On page 31, federal administration goals, projects that include safety, complete streets, and down below it says equity. How do you apply equity into these plans, and is that rural versus metropolitan, or rural, urban versus rural, or how is that applied?
Sure. So it is one of the goals of the administration, as outlined, that the funding be dispersed via population densities. And so there's an outline in the plan for, you know, a certain percent of the funding goes to population centers of 250,000 or more. But it's got details like that in the plan, and it's based on population densities.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Cal.
Question, I don't know if Teresa or Adam covered this on the breakdown of the contributions for CO. I was very surprised, 50% industrial. I was hoping maybe you just give me an example of what that would be. It doesn't seem like, per se, we have a lot of what we would think of as heavy industry.
Right. So they break it down into economic sectors, and some of the industry is like up on the North Slope. There's a lot of oil and gas operations up there. And they have natural gas that they use quite regularly when they have excess coming up to help regulate the system. But it takes into every industry that there could be. And, you know, part of this comes into, we may not have the same dynamics as the rest of the United States, but we do have quite a bit of an industry sector up here that's working and operating.
Last question.
Yep, go ahead, Kellen.
So the carbon reduction program, 20 years ago, we had some CO issues in Fairbanks. We were a non-payment area, then a maintenance area. That's essentially been worked out. Our main pollutant issue right now is particulate matter, PM2.5. So I guess I don't even really know how to phrase this question. How does this new program with all of these funding opportunities overlap with essentially our biggest issue here of PM2.5?
So that's a really good question and a good opportunity to clarify. It took me some time to get these straight too. So there's national ambient air quality standards, and those are the ones that are the PM2.5, PM10, carbon monoxide, and those are air quality issues that are not necessarily greenhouse gas issues. Greenhouse gas has a whole suite of other elements, including carbon dioxide, that it regulates. And so this carbon reduction plan is targeting the greenhouse gas issues. Could this plan be used to fund opportunities to reduce the NAAQS, as we call them, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards reduction of emissions? I don't actually know the answer to that, but I can provide that point of clarification that that set of elements is different than the greenhouse gas set of elements.
All right, thank you. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, I can, kind of add a little bit of clarity to that too. And, that's exactly correct that the NACs are those are the PM 2.5 and the carbon monoxide that we have had non-attainment issues with. And these are greenhouse gas emission reductions. Generally, when you're looking at emission reductions from an air quality perspective, a lot of these pollutants, whether they're greenhouse gas or the criteria pollutants, are related to fuel combustion. So if you address the core issue of fuel combustion, you can, potentially lower, all pollutants across the board. So you could lower greenhouse gas, and you can also lower your PM 2.5 in your primary air quality pollutants. I think a good example would be thinking about something like weatherization in homes. You could go out for a control measure that targeted weatherization in homes and try to get some money to insulate homes. That would help greenhouse gas emissions because you would need less energy to heat that home. And conversely, it would also help PM 2.5 emissions because you would reduce those as well. So they can work together, but they are definitely separate programs in this sense.
Right, I have a few questions, or go ahead, Bob. I'll ask my questions after you.
Thanks, Jackson. These categories here, safety, complete streets, etc., are projects scored against these areas, and are they weighted equally?
That is a good question, and we are looking forward to working with FAST to see what they've done thus far and make sure that our strategy aligns with what they have done thus far. We're not quite there yet with this strategy in terms of implementation plans. Right now, all we've done thus far is done some background research and data gap and started identifying some preliminary strategies. So great question, and we're looking forward to digging into that.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got a series of, I think they're relatively easy questions, but Olivia, if you go to page 27. So in the larger pie chart there for CO2 emissions by mode of transportation, this might be a question for Adam. Were those calculated based on fuel sales, or was there some other analysis method?
It was a combination of methods, but fuel cells was a large contributor to them. And part of it was DOT's tracking of vehicle miles traveled for the on-road. So aviation and marine, definitely fuel cells drove those. And then, yeah, vehicle miles traveled plus fuel cells contributed to the other.
All right, perfect. Yeah, thanks for the confirmation there. And then on the same slide here, so my understanding is these carbon reduction program funds in which you guys are developing the strategy for the funding must be used for transportation or on-road transportation projects. So despite the fact that aviation likely has the highest CO2 emissions, these carbon reduction program funds are likely not to be spent on aviation projects. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, they're going to be spent on road, and there are marine, like at the ports. There's possibilities for facilities there to use the funding. But part of the allocation for this came from the US, and they're looking at on-road was about 83% contributing, and aviation was less than 10%. So we have quite the flip in what's going on elsewhere. So.
Okay, thanks. Olivia, if you go to page 29, and I guess this is not necessarily a question and more of a comment. As you can see on the screen here, where Fast Planning is getting, with that funding plus match, it's about $1 million per year for our carbon reduction programs allocated to our area. I wanted to bring attention to AMAT's line item above that, which is $3.5+ million per year. As I understand from their director, they didn't hold any type of competitive process to award these funds to transportation projects that would improve air quality. My understanding is that they're taking those funds and simply applying them to existing projects that they have in their tip. Because of, in large part, because of the project estimates have increased, their bids are coming back high. So I guess just to point out, these funds are so flexible, they may just be swallowed up without actually being devoted to new project ideas that come to the table. And that's what I heard is occurring in Anchorage. And so so there may or may not be a, you know, competitive process that the state pushes out for some of these, say, statewide dollars, because I believe DOT has a flexibility to simply apply them to existing projects that they have on the book. So anyways, just a comment there. We, of course, have moved our funds to combine them with our congestion mitigation and air quality dollars, so that we spend them specifically on projects that have a benefit to air quality, since we're in a non-attainment area for air quality in our area. So, but just a note about the flexibility there. And then I guess my last comments here on page 32, as the Dow representatives did request, I would like to hear from some technical committee members as to, you know, what strategies you might want to offer up today for inclusion into the statewide plan. I think you all have been thinking about, you know, carbon reduction program projects over the past few months, as you've nominated a number to us. Things that I saw that sailed to the top was, you know, electric vehicle charging stations. So promoting alternative fuel use for personal and fleet vehicles. I'm also a big fan of some of the signal interconnect projects that have been occurring around Fairbanks and North Pole. And we're looking at, you know, providing funding for stage 2 of a very large project over about $20 million invested already in our community, but it helps, you know, improve the efficiency of traffic flow throughout the community. So that's a strategy I think that we can get behind up here. And then kind of lastly, you know, really anything related to transit to increase ridership on transit and reduce the use of personal vehicles in our area and there's many different strategies that can come out of that, but improving access and trying to increase ridership for transit, I think, is a big one for our area. But I'd like to hear from other technical committee members as to what other strategies you all think might be good to provide some feedback to Dow on today. Yeah, Kellen?
I don't necessarily know it's a strategy, but I think it dovetails with all of the strategies. I've been involved with developing and scoring CMAQ projects since I think 2010. And for the first probably 8 years, we just guessed how much they would improve the air quality.
Yep.
We didn't have a quantifiable metric for that. And we scored probably close to 100 different projects over that time, just really guessing like, oh, I think it will improve the air. I think it won't improve the air. In the last couple of years through FASTS program, we've quantified that. So I believe that's a contract you have with Sierra Research or whoever, and actually quantify that. And I think that's a huge benefit for the program because you're not guessing, and you're not maybe skewing your own scores on a project you like. It's actually quantifiable by a third party. So I would very much advocate the state when they're putting together scoring criteria for probably their massive statewide projects to have a third party consider the actual air quality benefit of that rather than just kind of qualitatively guessing, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Kellen. It's a very good point, because we do have, for the last 2 rounds of project nominations, we do have emission benefit calculations across a number of different pollutants. So in this round specifically included carbon dioxide. So we know the project ideas that we came up with, what that exact emission benefit is projected to be. So, and that's information we can provide to Dow to help kind of tease out some of the things in our area that kind of sailed to the top on the emission benefit calculations. And John?
Oh, yeah. Keeping traffic flowing, like you said, through roundabouts, signal interconnects, interchanges and road passes. Anything that prevents you from having to stop and wait.
Yep. Yeah, I forgot to mention that one, John, but we're I will say personally, I'm a huge fan of roundabouts in our area, and we've got 13 built so far, and we've got, I think, 3 or 4 more coming down the line, but that always helps with keeping traffic flow moving.
And or right turn lanes, just
Mhm.
stuff that, you know, other people may think.
Right, and also has a big safety benefit, which is part of the criteria that was shared on page 31. So, roundabouts, yeah, get extra points all around on that. All right, any other ideas? Feedback for Dal? Anything online? No? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Kellen.
One final question. All right, so I guess as far as the technical committee is concerned, what's our next step? Are we kind of holding tight, waiting for that draft plan to come out in July?
Yeah, I think July was the targeted date on the schedule for release of the draft plan. So this presentation was being given to you, but also will be given to the policy board next month to kind of get everybody to start thinking about this. From our discussion today, I can send some documents to Dal and so that they can see how projects match up with our emission benefit calculations. But yeah, really, we're just anticipating the draft plan being released, and once that's released, we can have an official comment letter come out of fast planning, supporting certain things or adding or requesting things be added or suggesting things be removed. So in the next couple months, this will be back on the agenda for an official list of comments to Dal and DOT on the draft strategy. But as the feedback that they're getting from Anchorage and us and Matsu and other organizations they present to, obviously we hope that will be folded into this draft document, which doesn't necessarily exist just yet.
Okay, thanks.
All right, any closing comments from Dal folks?
Just thank you very much for giving us the time to present what we have thus far. And it sounds like FAST has done a lot of work towards this end. So we look forward to collaborating with you guys and working in the future on this.
All right, thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item 8B on the agenda. The 2023 through 2027 Transportation Improvement Program Administrative Modification number 1. This is an action item here today. I'm actually going to, at the end of my introduction here, actually suggest that no motion be made on this item unless you also feel moved to act on it at this time. But I have, at the request of the policy board, I did prepare an administrative modification to show how Fifth Avenue would be fully funded with the approximately $900,000 increase for that project to award the low bid amount, and how that will impact Mini Street by moving all the project phases out 1 year. I do know that the FAST Improvement Program, in which John Atardos is in charge of, should be going out to bid here soon. And based on those bid prices coming back, we may have to modify this funding plan again if they come in appreciably over what we have programmed in our funding plan. So I'm going to end up suggesting that we don't make a motion on this today, wait for those bids to come back, and then rectify all the funding changes that we need to in this funding plan. But for now, I'll show you how this change as a result of a couple weeks ago on Fifth Avenue is modifying our funding plan. So on page 35, you'll see in this draft administrative modification, the additional funds provided for Fifth Avenue there. And then on page, it's page 39, you'll see Mini Street. Mini Street was expected to have their final design funding provided for that project next year, federal fiscal year 2024. So they'd be made available after October 1st this year. But providing those 2024 advanced construction dollars to Fifth Avenue, we needed something roughly $1 million to slide out a year. And the policy board selected Mini Street. So it pushes the final design and right-of-way phases out a year. as well as utilities. This was a project that was planned to go to construction in 2027. So it pushes construction out to 2028. But to show you kind of year to year how that modifies our available fund balance. Olivia, if you go to page 43, I think this is the most important page for this administrative modification. So as you can see here, we needed about $900,000, but the mini street project phases were a little bit in excess of that. So by moving mini street out 1 year, it frees up about $250,000 in 2024 funds and about $375,000 in 2025 funds. So the $250,000 there would allow us to, if the fast improvement program that goes out to bid this month, if the bids come in 10% higher than what the engineer's estimate was, we can cover it with that money. If it's in excess of 10%, then we're going to have to kind of rework our funding plan a little bit, but it does provide us a buffer for increases there. Then in 2025, again, we've got about $375,000 open as a whole. But then in 2027, which was the planned year of construction for Mini Street, it opens up about a $6 million hole for us to advance other projects that we have in the queue. And I don't, as part of this administrative modification, I was not planning to program anything in 2027 to fill that $6 million hole. And the reason being is that this is really a 4-year funding plan. So per federal regulations. So in 2026, we have to create a new funding plan that would go from 27 to say 2030. And so we'll have a better idea in the years to come what's happening with our projects and what is most appropriate to try to fill that funding gap in 2027. Perhaps Holmes Road is ready, or we want to get 4th Avenue reconstruction advanced a year in the queue, or perhaps fund phase 2 of the North Pole Streetlight Standardization Project. I mean, there's a lot of different options on the table that I don't think we necessarily need to make a decision on this year. But it's just more important to look at the $2024 and $2025 that there is some unprogrammed funding availability in those 2 years. But again, I prefer to just wait for the next round of bids to come back and then comprehensively between the 5th Avenue change and this next round of bids, put forward an administrative modification in June or July, whenever those bids may come back. So I'm going to open it up for questions. John, go ahead.
If we do comments as well.
Yeah, because there may or may not be a motion that's made. I mean, the technical committee, of course, can just recommend the board approve this and move forward, or any other motion you want to make, but go ahead with any comments that you have.
I wanted to make a comment that I saw earlier at the meeting, the policy board had like the 3 choices and they selected A.
Yep.
Instead of C.
Yep.
And there was 2 projects on C that I wanted to talk about. One of them was the Lacey Street project.
See, Olivia, if you go to page 10. The bottom.
So, yeah, it's shown on C there, which they did not select, but the Lacey Street reconstruction, fiscal year 23, it looks like we're asking for $150,000 for that for a planning study, phase 9. And then there's not even design funding until the beyond column, which is 2080. And that's a lot of time in between studying something and then starting to design it. So it's not logical to have it that far apart. The Lacey Street could be way back.
Yeah, in the tip, Lacey Street is the design through construction phases are what we call illustrative. So at any time through an amendment to the tip, funding can be added for that. And we think that the design start will likely, we could fit it in 24 or 25, but we want to know what the scope of the Lacey Street project will be. This is more for scope refinement and then coming up with a new estimate for that roadway project. So the expectation is within the next year at the policy board level, they'll be considering through an amendment providing funding for that The construction still may be in 2028 or later, but with one of these holes that we have in the tip, that we could get the design going.
Okay, that makes sense,
Soon.
because I wasn't seeing the design funding, and it would ideally be 2 years
Yep.
after a study. Okay, and then the other one was Tiger Road Airport Way intersection study, which has 300,000 for fiscal year 23. I believe DOT is looking at starting up a corridor study of all of Tiger Road using our funds, or statewide.
I heard that.
And so that would be something. That would be a duplication effort if we were studying it with this effort, and then we did a whole corridor study.
If we had a $300,000 hole in our budget this year, that'd be wonderful. Because then I could pay for change orders.
Okay, that's,
So,
that's
but
what I'd like.
I have not received any official communication from DOT or any request to remove that $300,000 as of this time. So it's something they're probably going to put in the new STIP, the 24 through 26 STIP, but I'm still waiting to hear on that one.
Okay,
so-
I'll let them know.
Defunding things is great, but I've only heard suggestions. There's been no promises made yet.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Kellen, go ahead.
One more time, your recommendation is to do nothing right now because you're expecting some more projects to come in high. We'll just do it all as one.
Right.
either amendment or active mod.
Yep. I think the most important thing is on page 43, just for everybody to understand, by delaying Mini Street, it does free up some money over the next couple of years. And so you see what's available. It's not a lot of money, but I would rather wait to approve this administrative modification to the day when we have a better idea of what our next large construction project, where the bids come back in on. But the policy board did ask me to prepare this, so you don't necessarily need to act on it, but so they can see the consequences of their decision last month. Is the appropriate wording, I think.
We may not see the results of that bid opening by next meeting, if that matters.
No, I understand. I understand that's a risk. Yep. It might be July when this comes back.
Do you want a motion to postpone?
Sure, yeah. So let me open this up for, if there's no other questions, let me open it up for public comment before you make a motion to postpone. So any other questions online? Okay. Any public comment on this item today? Okay, hearing none. Kellen, you have a motion?
Move to postpone this item to our June meeting.
Okay, motion made by Kellen Spillman. Is there a second? Second by John Tardis. Okay. Any discussion?
Hey, this is Danny. Can you repeat the motion?
Is to postpone this item to our June meeting.
Thank you.
The only discussion.
Yeah, go ahead, Kellen.
Seems logical. No use going through this process 2 or 3 times if the action isn't imminent right now, especially with the years 2024, 2025.
Yep, okay. Any other discussion? Okay, I don't really hear any controversy, so I'm just going to ask, is there any technical committee member opposed to postponing this item until next month? Are you voting against this, John?
Yeah.
We'll provide an update in June if you're not ready yet, yeah. Okay, I'm not hearing anyone opposed, so we'll just consider that motion approved. Okay, let's move on to item 8C, the fast plan and fiscal policy revision, which is on pages 44 through 56 of the packet. So as a result of our discussions at the technical committee level last month regarding the budget amendment that I brought forward to increase funding for 2 different budget categories for our office operations, as well as discussion that was held at the policy board level. The policy board directed me to prepare a revision to our internal fiscal policy to allow me as executive director to be able to do budget transfers between budget categories without getting approval from the technical committee or policy board. However, and then kind of better define the circumstances in which I would bring forward a budget amendment that the policy board would be interested in wanting to see and approve before additional funds were allocated to different budget categories. So let's see, beginning on page 48, I typed up a new section for covering the annual budget and what triggers and who has authorization for budget transfers and budget amendments. The opening paragraph here really just states that our annual budget is based on the federal fiscal year, and that as executive director, I will develop and propose an annual budget to our board at least 1 month prior to the beginning of each budget year. And that the budget that I bring forward has to be fiscally constrained to the amount of funding that is available to our office in our TIP, or our Transportation Improvement Funding Plan. And then for budget transfers, this was the language that the policy board wanted me to put in. This authorizes me as executive director to move available budget dollars from one budget category to another on an as-needed basis for all budget categories except personnel, except for that one budget category. And this is something that I would be able to do, and then simply notify the board of that budget transfer at their next meeting. But then for official budget amendments, which would have to be approved by the policy board, I provide 3 circumstances in which a budget amendment would be required. Number 1 on the bottom of the page is a change in expected revenues. So this would be the change in our planning fund dollars that we get through from the state. So whether it's an increase or decrease, if there's a change in our expected revenue, I would bring forward a budget amendment to, again, fiscally constrain our office budget to that amount. And then number 2 on the next page, this would be a request from me, the executive director, to either increase or decrease the total operating budget amount. So this would be the total budget amount across all budget categories. So if you want to raise it from, say, 730,000 up to 750,000, I would still have to bring that forward to the policy board for approval. And then number 3, any budget adjustment to the personnel category would have to go to the policy board. So pretty simple, straightforward language. I did share this with our board chair, and he said it looked good. Yeah, but the policy board is expecting to have this in front of them this month for approval. So any questions on the fiscal policy revision? Okay, not seeing any questions. Is there any public comment on this item before we take a motion? All right, seeing no public comment. So we'll go ahead and close the public comment period. I'm now looking for a motion on recommending to the policy board whether or not to adopt this fiscal policy revision.
Bill Rogers, so moved.
All right, thank you, Bill. Is there a second? Second by Jacob. Okay, discussion. We move back to 31.
31.
Or sorry, you're right there. Next page up. Yeah, go ahead, Kellen.
Seems logical. We have a very similar process at the borough. I think a lot of government entities do. The policy board just doesn't need to be involved, in my opinion, and, you know, taking one less trip and buying a software, whatever it is.
Okay.
Seems great.
Thanks, Kellen. Any other comments, questions, discussion? Okay, not seeing any. Any technical committee member opposed to recommending to the policy board to approve the fiscal policy revision? Okay, seeing no one opposed, we'll consider that motion approved unanimously. And we'll move on to our last agenda item, item 8D, the FAST Improvement Program. Federal fiscal year 2025 subcommittee meeting scheduling. This begins on page 57 in the packet. So John Tardis is getting very antsy. He wants to start his new parent project to begin designing a bundle of road or sidewalk path projects for the fast improvement program. We are allocating to him $200,000 to begin this design effort. But he needs to know what the priorities are from the technical committee and policy board on which projects to bundle together for to go to construction in 2025. And the budget's going to be roughly about $1.1 million worth of projects. What I've included in your packet is everything known to date with regard to projects that have been nominated to us over time for this program. On page 57, you can see the bundle of projects that are going to construction this summer for Aztec Road Service Area, Second Avenue Dog Park, and the crosswalk on College Road. And then below that, we have a list of road and sidewalk and path projects, as well as some intersection and safety projects on the very bottom there that have been nominated to us, but not made the cut in a previous year. And then on the next page, you'll see the list of gravel to pavement projects that were nominated to our CMAQ and carbon reduction program over the last 2 rounds. Again, these are gravel to pavement. They were nominated to our process to select projects that would improve air quality, provided these really only have a summertime benefit and not a wintertime benefit when we have our air quality concerns. I think the improvement program is a better program to fund these projects since these have been nominated to us. They're in our funding plan in an out year, but they're very low priority projects for CMAQ dollars. So they're all listed there, everything that's been nominated to us. And then behind that, just to remind everybody that last year, the Bike and Ped Advisory Committee looked through all the sidewalk and path project nominations, and they put those in priority order. And on page 60, you'll see basically their top 8 from last fall. A number of these have been funded. The crosswalk and College Roads going to construction this summer. The bike lane signing and striping, that'll be a design start this year. The College Road safety and access improvements, funding for that was removed by the policy board, so that one's off the table at this time. And then the Second Avenue Dog Park on the bottom, that goes to construction this summer. But there's some in the middle there, the Farmers Loop path, which is spot repairs, and then the Mitchell Expressway path, which would be a mill and pave. There's still a few there that, again, are not yet funded, but likely would be very high priority for the Bike and Ped Advisory Committee. So in any event, we do have some good input and resource documents for both road and sidewalk and path projects to consider it for a project bundle for 2025. And what I would like to do is this week, we'll have myself or Olivia send out a doodle poll to pull together a subcommittee meeting of the technical committee to take a look at all of these projects and provide opportunity for each nominating agency to tell us what your top projects are for consideration for this next round. We do try to give each local government at the table a slice of the pie. So we try to get something in there for UAF, something in there for the 2 cities, something in there for the borough. So this is a process in which it's very subjective, and in order to pull out some of these projects for a bundle, we're not scoring them in any way, shape, or form. We're just, everybody's coming to the table with their priorities, and we hope to get consensus on roughly a $1.1 million package to take up to the policy board. So, but we have a ton of projects to look at. But again, we'll send out a doodle poll for anyone interested in participating in this to bring it back to the technical committee and policy board in June. So any questions or comments on that? Yep, John, go ahead.
Sure. There's a lot of TBDs on here for the cost. I don't know if that meeting would be constructive without a cost associated with each project. So either I need to come up with all those, or hopefully some of these entities can help. At least, some kind of cost that they think it is, that's realistic. And then, like you said, we've never really scored it, but this program really gives projects that give a really good like bang for your buck, and are great for the community. So I guess it is a little subjective, but these projects have always been awesome, great, and a great way to spend money. And then I'm hoping to get a list, in order that, or maybe a few kind of bundles that add up to 1.1 million with a few extra projects as contingencies, depending on what our detailed estimates come out at. We either have to cut some or could have the potential to add one or two, like on this year's project, we were able to add Second Avenue Dog Park, because it was a small little chunk of change, and we already had a design and estimated and ready to add to the project to get to the number we need.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. Yeah, so as he stated, I guess I'll restate it. We're not looking for just a bundle of 1.1 million. We're looking for, maybe 1.5 million dollars worth of projects. But we need to identify what those projects are so that John's not tasked with coming up with estimates for all of these on the list, but at least we can get them in close, and then he can do some cost estimating. And, perhaps we don't consider approval of this bundle until July, but we certainly want to get it done this summer so that he has some direction on what to begin designing. So we may have one subcommittee meeting, or we may have two to kind of sort this out. But, and I'll send this out via email once we get a date and time scheduled. But really what I want you all to do is to go back to your respective departments and administrations and figure out, for the city of Fairbanks, what's your top 3 projects on this list? Or maybe you have a new one that you want to add to it and abandon some of these. Same thing for, UAF and City of North Pole and various departments of the borough. So, and some of these are state facilities that are, paths along in a DOT right away. So DOT may have an opinion on that, but of course our Bike and Ped Advisory Committee has the kind of pulse on what they think the highest priorities are for our area. So we already have their feedback, at least on that segment. Go ahead, John.
I would hope to see at the technical committee, someone from each group.
Correct.
The city of Fairbanks and North Pole person, and an SB person at least.
Yeah.
To talk about, because we all have their own interests, and maybe even one of those bike people, if they have their priority list.
Yep. No, sounds good. Yeah, we typically at the borough side, we have rural services at the table, Parks and Rec, and community planning typically. So, okay, any other questions, comments, discussion on that? Go ahead, Kellen.
I like John's new term of bike.
Okay. All right, so we have no other issues today. 2 quick things on informational items. Item 10A, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which begins on page 62. Just to let you all know, there is another discretionary grant opportunity that's on the street now. Applications are due August 1st for the Wildlife Crossings Pilot Program. So this is not just for construction projects, and it can also be for planning efforts. But the goal of this funding program is to reduce the number of wildlife vehicle collisions and improve habitat connectivity for terrestrial and aquatic species. In looking at this, I live on the Hot Springs Road, and there's a particular stretch that 5 to 6 moose get killed on per year. And typically those accidents are pretty bad, sometimes result in fatalities. It seems like a planning effort for our area for locations where there's high wildlife vehicle collisions with moose, particularly with the safety components, quite a bit different than hitting a white-tailed deer. Might be something to pursue for us. I don't know that we necessarily have a lot of research into that for our area. I know UAF has done a very extensive research project on different ways in the road right away to discourage moose from crossing at different locations, or at least make them a lot more visible. There's a very good research study at the UAF on that, but combined with that research, understanding where we have these moose collisions throughout our urban area, I think would be a benefit to see It could be as simple as treatments, not necessarily fences like they have down in Anchorage along the Glen Highway, but, just better right-of-way clearing, perhaps better lighting, so that when the moose is in the ditch, at least you can see it, and it's, when you're driving in the dark. So they could be low-cost infrastructure improvements that help resolve this, but I think a concerted planning effort would be good. But in any event, this is open. I'm taking a look at it on page 65. You'll see that for the award size, they're looking at projects at minimum $200,000 up to about 20 million. Again, I don't necessarily have any infrastructure projects in mind, but a planning effort would be good. The list of non-construction and construction projects is on the next page, page 66. And US DOT is looking for a 20% match, though there is a little bit of wiggle room in that. As we've seen in some of the latest discretionary grant programs, that can be waived in certain circumstances. So any questions on that item or comments, John?
It says and improve habitat connectivity for terrestrial and aquatic species, so would that be a fish passage culvert?
That I don't know yet, because I haven't read the entire NOFO on this, but that did capture my attention. And I'm gonna look into that, but that wouldn't classify though as a wildlife vehicle collision unless the salmon were swimming across the road. So we've seen pictures of that throughout Alaska, right? When the road floods, we've seen it.
Yeah, that's why I read and improve habitat. You're right though, you rarely collide with salmon.
Yep, right. I'm sure it's happened though in the state of Alaska. But I mean, I don't know, is a beaver an aquatic species that sometimes gets hit? I don't know. I'll look into this. But I think it's an interesting opportunity that, again, in the lower 48, when a vehicle strikes wildlife, a deer or bird or whatever else, generally it's generally there's not a fatality. But up here in Alaska, moose are kind of a big deal that has resulted in many fatalities throughout the state. So anyways, we might have a good application there. Okay. Next item is obligations and offsets. Item 10B begins on page 67. With Fifth Avenue getting out to bid and bids coming back, our obligations are now up to 53%. The only other project that goes out to bid for us this year is the Fast Improvement Program. So that's the next one that we'll see obligated within the next month as it goes out to bid. And then on offsets, page 69, we're still a little bit in the hole here on offsets, about 52,000 in the hole. And but we hope to get some offsets to make that, get that number back in the black here over the next few months. So we're still in the same situation here, and this can also be resolved through the administrative modification once we know what the bids come in on the Fast Improvement Program. That's where we're at. Any questions on obligations and offsets? Okay, seeing none, we're on to technical committee member comments. Any comments from technical committee members today? Yeah, Kellen?
One question, one comment, if you allow me.
Yeah.
First question, was wondering if you've heard anything back from the state on our proposed administrative code change in regard to sheriffs?
Nothing in the last month, yeah. I provided an update to the technical committee last month, but I haven't heard anything new in the last 30 days.
Okay. And second kind of comment slash question. About a month ago, the Planning Commission, let me start from the beginning. There's a provision in state statute that whenever there's a DOT project in a municipality, the Planning Commission reviews it, approves it. Planning Commission did that with the Steese Johansson interchange, very, very large project. The Assembly took action on that last week and finished the local planning authority approval, but very much heavily encouraged, I think is the term that was used, a pedestrian tunnel under that. I think there's been a lot of kind of misinformation going around on whether a pedestrian tunnel is included in the project, is not included in the project, is funded with the project, or other funds need to be used for that. So I think my request would be maybe at our next meeting, if we could have it could even be informational, just on that East Johansson interchange and what the department's intention with that tunnel is. And if funds really are needed, I'd like to maybe continue that conversation through this body. But I think just we need some clarity first on that. So that's my request.
Good, I like it. Okay, we can add that to next month's agenda. John?
Yes, last month we were talking about the Sheep Creek Road and West Panama Drive roundabout. And I didn't know the cost of the improvements that we had done there last year at the time. So, and I said I would come back and tell you what it was. It cost about $350,000 to fix the left turn pocket there and have the cars be able to go around safely. And that's less than 10% of the larger overall new project that we went in the same location. So I'm just following up on letting you know about what the price was for that improvement. Cheap cost for a really nice improvement that's a lot safer.
Yeah, thank you, John. Appreciate that. Any technical committee member comments online? Nice. Oh, Danny, go ahead.
No, inadvertent click, ignore that.
All right. Okay, I'm not seeing any online and no more in the room. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Thank you, John Weinberger. Is there a second?
Hey, if
Second,
Thank you, Kevin.
if we could only get the moose to cross where we signed for them to cross, you know.
I know. All right, anyone opposed to adjournment? Hearing none, we are adjourned at 1:43 p.m. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next month.
That's really interesting because at the home show, we got a comment that